It is now safe to say that budget season has spurred a lot of tension here in New York and also in many other states. Over the weekend, a group of protesters voiced their frustrations with Governor Andrew Cuomo's proposed spending cuts during his address to the Association of Black and Puerto Rican Legislators. And of course, this comes at a time when there is an all-out war between public employees and the governor out in Wisconsin. This leads some people to worry if that's merely a harbinger of what's to come elsewhere in the nation, perhaps including in the traditionally pro-labor New York. Here to help me answer that question, and of course much more, our resident political insiders. Steve Greenberg is a pollster with the Siena Research Institute. Years ago, many years, he served as a press secretary, serving 2 Democratic Assembly speakers. I'm sorry. And across the table is Bob Bellafiore. He was a press secretary to former Republican Governor George Pataki. He is now with the charter school organization and National Heritage Academies, much younger than you.
It's amazing, given that we were freshmen at the same time. But okay, we can go with that story if you'd like.
I'm just kidding.
I think you were fresher than I was.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
All right.
You know.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we love you. All right, so speaking of the protesters and the association gala, which I actually was there for, and it was kind of an interesting moment, I think we have some video of that, and I'd like to play it so you guys who were not there can get a little bit of an idea.
How are you tonight, Charles? I can't see who it is, but I know who it is.
Okay, so that's Charles Barron. I think that viewers are probably familiar with him. He ran on the Freedom Party line, a self-created line last year. He is a New York City councilman from Brooklyn, and what he was yelling there was tax the rich, stop the cuts, and the governor handled it with humor. Thoughts on that?
Well, one about the way the governor handled it, he has his father's gift for, I mean, I once called Mario Cuomo the Johnny Carson of American politics because his timing was perfect. His comedic timing was perfect, and he handled that as well as you can handle it. Now, to be on, it's a long list of people who have been heckled by Charles Barron over budget issues. He's as liberal, as left as they come. He's familiar to New York City viewers and people on New York One, not so familiar to people in Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse.
He's been on this show a couple of times, but yeah, that's true. He's not a regular entity.
Right, but he is as liberal a legislator as you will ever find, and I'm sure there's never been a spending cut that he's been able to support.
Probably not.
No, look, you know, you never want to get heckled when you're giving a speech. And this is an audience largely black and Latino and Asian that was very supportive of the governor during the campaign and in the election, very supportive of him now. And his numbers among minority voters are
80 among the black voters, very high.
Through the roof. So you never want to get heckled. But on the other hand, it really doesn't hurt the governor from a statewide perspective that someone, as Bob describes, who's, you know, to the left of Chairman Mao, is heckling him, because that certainly sends a message as well, particularly to upstate voters, that, you know, if this guy is heckling Cuomo, maybe Cuomo's doing the right thing.
That may be true. However, there were people in that room, a number of them I spoke with, and actually the speakers who spoke that evening, all the statewide, also Charlie Rangel, who of course, as we know, has been censured and therefore is considerably weakened, but even former Governor Bill Richardson from New Mexico, who was the keynote that night, spoke of the need not to demonize public employees, which is something that I think that, you know, I mean, Governor Cuomo, to a certain degree, has been seen as doing.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think New York is very different than what's going on in Wisconsin. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, I don't think, has demonized labor. Look, he is trying to get serious concessions.
Labor would disagree with you.
Well, he's trying to get serious concessions from labor. He is making it clear that labor has to be part of the solution to fixing the state's budget problems. He's looking for major concessions from the labor unions, and clearly they don't like that, and understandably so. But at the same time, he is not trying to do here in New York what the governor of Wisconsin is doing, which is taking away labor's rights to collective bargaining.
Right.
You know, I think Andrew Cuomo distinguishes himself from the governor of Wisconsin in that regard.
Bob?
I think Steve's right. I mean, no, I think New York is a whole different thing. I mean, labor wants to make it look like it's being demonized because they want to look like a victim.
Sure.
When when they're clearly not a victim, but they like to reframe what the governor's doing as somehow attacking their rights to exist, which is not the case at all. Very different from what's going on in the Midwest.
There was also, though, a speech by Senator John Sampson, the minority leader in the Senate, who actually talked about the importance of shared sacrifice, the need not to have the budget cuts fall too heavily on the the backs of working people, of poor people. I mean, that was, to me, a clear pitch for the millionaire's tax, it sounded like.
No question about it. And look, you know, to a large extent, the public agrees with a lot of the rhetoric that was given at the caucus weekend this weekend. To a large extent, the voters of New York State support taxing the wealthy, continuing that tax on those New Yorkers earning more than $200,000 a year. New Yorkers don't like cuts in education. They don't like cuts in higher education. But taken as a whole package, what New Yorkers are saying right now is, yes, we support the governor's budget, despite the fact that there are pieces in there that we disagree with the governor on.
Right. I mean, do you see any way, in fact, after that, he spoke to reporters and said, I'm still against the extension of the millionaire's tax, which, nevertheless, it would bring in maybe $1 billion in the current fiscal year. It's supposed to be bringing in between $4 and $5 billion if it gets extended. But the governor was very clear. He said he thinks that it would be detrimental. It would send people outside of New York. Is there any wiggle room there that he can back off? He's been quite clear about it.
Well, there's always wiggle room, you know, when you get to the end of these negotiations. But I don't think there's anything that's been said in this budget debate that Governor Cuomo and his people did not anticipate and were not ready for, at least in terms of their mentality. Right? If they were unprepared, if they said, well, we're just going to slash and burn the budget and not anticipate, you know, not play this chess game 4, 5, 6, 7 moves down the road, then, you know, they might move based on a heckle or based on what somebody said or an argument in a TV ad. But I think they've thought this whole thing through.
I also think that the governor and his people know where the public is at on this tax on New York's wealthy. They know that if he moves there at the end, either on the current tax or maybe there's a compromise to be played. Instead of only taxing those over $200,000 as a compromise between Skelos, Silver, Cuomo, they agree hypothetically to extend the tax on those making more than $500,000. There is room for the governor to change his mind because he knows he won't get beat up because the thing he's changing his mind on is something that the public already supports.
Let's switch gears just briefly to New York 26, which is something that we've been focused a lot on this show. I mean, no big surprise that Assemblywoman Jane Corwin is the selection by the Republicans. We thought that was going to happen. But some potential sort of fomentation, which is probably not a word, of the Tea Party folks, and the possibility that New York 26 could become New York 23. Is that actually a possible scenario?
I think it's always a possibility until everybody signs on the dotted line with who their candidates are. But I think both the Republicans and the Tea Partiers, then there's really the conservatives, saw what happened in 23, and I don't think they want to repeat that again. So they'll figure out a way to not have it be a divisive or a three-way race.
Yeah.
The chances are that the only way that the Democrats can have a reasonable shot of picking up that seat is if there is this split between the Republicans and the Conservatives.
Well, that's why they've got this wait-and-see approach. You even heard peep from the governor about this particular issue.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, I think Bob is right. I think somehow the forces on the Republican side are going to figure out a way to get together to make sure that they don't turn New York 26 into New York 23.
And if they do, I would predict that the Democrats in Washington will not heavily invest in whoever their candidate is in New York 26.
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, this is not an election that will determine anything. It is a seat that is most likely going to exist for a year and a half and would be reapportioned out since New York's going to lose 2 seats before the 2012 election.
Right.
So I can't see the Democrats out of Washington spending a lot of money on this unless they see a clear break between the Republicans and the Conservatives.
Right.
So what you're saying is the Democrats are not going to give the shirt off their back to win this seat.
Oh, man. Okay. I'm going to leave it right there. Thanks very much, Bob Bellafiore. Yep. And thank you very much, Steve Greenberg.
Sorry.
Coming up, another big budget fight that has tensions running high. This one is in Washington, and it is over funding for Planned Parenthood. After the break, I'll be discussing that with Tracy Brooks from Family Planning Advocates of New York State. Please stay with us.